So welcome back. We just looked at how to validate our input fields using the request validate function or method, and we pass in the attribute, we pass in the name field, and we pass in the various attributes to validate against. But there is a problem here. Immediately we, for example, try and submit a form that doesn't make sense. Normally the form is supposed to fail. It fails, but it fails without showing you any error. But if you submit something that is, for example, working, right, we are normally supposed to see this. So the validation rules have passed. But when the validation rules fail, it just shows you a blank page. So we're looking at how can we effectively display the error messages, right, to our customer or to our user so that they know that this is failing or this is failing or this is failing. Again, you can still go back to the Laravel documentation and you will see that it has a part that says that displaying the validation errors. We'll just quickly copy this, right? And I'll explain briefly what it means. So if we copy this and go to our blade file, and it's saying that I'll maximize this. So this is where our focus is. So it says that if there's an errors variable that is created, and if there's any error, right? So this part will only display if there's an error. Remember us talking about the if blade directive. So this like if and then the if ends here. So if there's any error, it will look now through all of the errors, right? So it's going to say for each errors all as error, and then it displays this error. So we can save this one now and then see if it's going to display us that error. So we're going to refresh our page and we're going to submit a form that is normally going to fail, right? And if we submit this here, it shows us this part and says that, okay, the name field must be at least 5 characters, right? It's saying the name field must be at least 5 characters because we had put the validation rule to say minimum of 5. And if we change this to a minimum of 10, for example, and we submit this form again, just so you to be sure that everything is looking at good, and we save this. So now it says that the name field must be at least 10 characters. So the validation rule gives you an appropriate error message that is good for the user. But again, this is not well looking, it's not looking that nice. It will be better for us to have this error here and have this error here, right? So we can now go forward to to show how you can implement the specific error, right? So you've said that if error any, but there's another approach you can use. So if we go to the specific field that we want to show the error, for example, we say arrobas if errors has name, and if. So what we're saying here is if there's any error that has a name, right? If there's any error for the name attribute, so this name attribute, remember, is for this, right? And so we're going to say, just show me a span tag. Right? Oops, sorry. Just show me a span tag, and the value of that span tag is going to be errors first name. So there is a method again chained to this object errors that is called first. So if you see that this errors is an object, it has a method called any, it has a method called all, it has a method called has, it has a method called first. You can explore a lot of the methods that these errors have. So this errors is an object that helps you to catch all the errors of your form. So if you do this, I'm going to add a small CSS here, style, color, red, just so that we have it nice and clean. I'm going to do same thing here, color, no, style, color, red. We're going to add a CSS, maybe bootstrap to this later on so we don't have to write this. So if I save this and I come back to my form, I refresh here, and I put a name that is small, an email that is like this, and so you see that at this point now, it is showing us that the name attribute has a problem, right? We can do the same thing for email. I copy this, and then I'll change this from name, increase this, I'll change this from name to email. So I'm saying that if the request has an error with parameter email, you should display the first error message for email. And we're going to do the same thing for message, right? So if we save this and we go back to our form, I would like us to comment this out so that we focus on displaying the errors around the field which has the error. So if I save this, I refresh, and I put a name, for example, submit this, you see now that the errors display around where you have the confirmation. So it says that the first name must be of the name field must be at least 10 characters, the message field must be at least 10 characters. If we also want to come and say we remove totally the client-side validation, for example, remove the required field to test, and if we save this, we refresh our form. If you submit this form, you see now that it catches the first error, right? The name field is required. If you come to our controller here, you see that the name field is required. Now we put the name field, Martin, and we submit. It goes now and tells you, so this validation passed, now this validation fails, right? So if I put Martin Tayon, for example, and I submit the form, this has worked. But then it has created us another issue. Each time you submit the form, you cannot, and the validation fails, you cannot see the previous input field. It may be difficult for you to do that. Imagine that you have a form that is, let's say, 20 fields and you have to fill all of them, and then you make a mistake and you cannot see it. So with Laravel, it provides you a way to implement that you can show the old values here, which we're going to see it shortly. To implement the old value, you can just say the value here is old name. So what you just need to put is value is equal to old name. So when you say old, it's like the previous value that was there, the name. I can do the same thing for input email. So value is equal to old email. And then for message here, if there was an old value, we say old message. And if we save this and we refresh our page, we say the name, for example, I put the name of Martin, which was short, right? I submit. You see that it shows me the error, but the old value is still there. And if I put an email, for example, this, and I submit, the validation for the email works now, and the email is still there. If I put another part here, this validation works now, right? And the input field still stays. And now if you come and put a description, I like this tutorial, I would love to learn more, for example, and by the time we submit, or let me put it for a shorter version, so this is likely not up to 10 characters. You see the first validation message is the field is required. Immediately you submit, it changes now because it has validated the required field. Now it has changed to the message field must be at least 10 characters. So we go now, I like this tutorial, I would love to learn more, for example. And now we're assuming that this is up to 10 characters and we submit it, we see that our form now is well validated because we can see this. So this is where we've seen how to validate, we have seen how to show the errors, we have seen how to display the old values in the form in case the validation fails, and that is a complete validation. In the next tutorial, we're going to see another approach of writing validation rules, which is the standard validation rules for the market in the Laravel ecosystem.